Known for the fertile soil, amazing farmers markets, and some of this country's most talked about chefs, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming make up the Northwest, and it has become a major producer of world-class fruits and vegetables. Today I'll share 4 recipes highlighting some of my favorites. We're going to show you how to make this delectable Blackberry Cobbler with a buttery, crumbly biscuit topping, and Chewy Fig Bars, so much better than the store-bought. Idaho potato cake, who would have guessed? And hazelnut cookies with 5 ingredients. All of these today on Martha Bakes. In the Northwest, during the late summer and early fall, when there's an abundance of blackberries growing just about everywhere, I don't think there's a better way to use them than by making a cobbler. Made with either a moist batter or a biscuit topping, cobblers are said to have originated in the American West during the second half of the 19th century. And cobbler is pretty much just what it says, ingredients cobbled together to make something delicious. So in a bowl, we're going to make the biscuit topping first. Combine 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, ½ teaspoon of coarse salt, and into the dry ingredients, cut, preferably with a pastry cutter, 1 stick, 1/4 pound, 8 tablespoons of cold butter. And you can cut it in faster if you cut the butter up into little pieces, but make sure the butter's cold. You want a nice, flaky biscuit. And a cobbler is different from a crisp or a crumble because the cobbler's top layer is more biscuit-like. Crisp is generally made with brown sugar, oatmeal, a little flour, some spice. That looks nice. And then just pour in 3/4 cup of heavy cream. Looks good. Don't overwork the biscuits. If you overwork the biscuits, they won't be flaky or tender. They'll be dense. You want the dough to look just like this, a little crumbly. And I know some people who make their biscuits only with their fingers. They would never use a spoon. They insist that their hands are fast enough to work that dough, so it never becomes tough. Now you could form these in your hands, or you could gently roll them on a floured surface, and I think I'll just put the dough right here. You don't really even have to do that. You could sort of scoop it out with a spoon and press it into biscuits, but I like to put it together a little bit more than this. This is a little crumbly. So if you make this into kind of a square, you can cut it into 9 biscuits. So cut this into 3 and 3. There we have our 9 biscuits. Now the filling itself. 6 cups of beautiful blackberries, 3 pints. Generally, when you pick them, they're clean and beautiful like that. So if you see anything on them, just rinse them a little bit, but don't get them soaking wet. We need 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This will help thicken the juices. Sprinkle this around. And a ½ cup of sugar. And you can just shake it around like that, or take a rubber scraper and lightly toss. And just a light sprinkling of a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon just brightens the flavor of those blackberries. So beautiful. That's your filling. Now, I have the pan on a parchment-lined baking sheet, a rack on top of that, and a 8-inch square pan, 8 by 8. And that is the right size pan for this particular cobbler. These will become so juicy and so purple and so beautiful as they cook. And just pick up your biscuits and place them 3 by 3. I think I could use this little spatula to make sure I get them really fantastic. And we're not done yet, because the biscuits then get brushed with heavy cream. So you'll have 9 portions. Now brush the tops with heavy cream. This will help get a beautiful color on these biscuits. And then sprinkle the biscuits with a nice sparkly sanding sugar. It has a real beautiful sparkle to it. It's nice and crunchy on top of the biscuit. If you're making strawberry shortcakes, always put a little of this sugar on the biscuits for your strawberry shortcakes. There. Ready to go into a preheated 375-degree oven and bake until the berries are bubbling and the biscuits are golden brown. And that takes 50 to 75 minutes, so watch it after 50 minutes. If the biscuits are browning too quickly, just tent the whole thing with a piece of foil. Now once you take the cobbler out of the oven, let it cool for about 30 minutes. Don't serve it right out of the oven. It's way, way too hot. But serve it warm and juicy. And you could serve it with whipped cream, with nothing, or I like to serve it with a scoop of delicious vanilla ice cream. And not too big a scoop. So pretty and so good. Look what we've cobbled together. Blackberry Cobbler. Delicious, simple, and no biscuit cutter required. Do you know there are over 75 varieties of figs growing in Oregon's Willamette Valley? Today I'm using dried figs to make Chewy Fig Bars. 1 cup of millet flour. Everything's made right in the food processor, by the way. 1 cup of all-purpose flour. 2/3 of a cup of sugar. This is the dough that will encase the figs. 2/3 a cup of granulated sugar, a pinch of salt, 2 egg yolks, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 1.5 sticks of butter, 12 tablespoons of butter. Not exactly room temperature, it's not cold though. And then just pulse until the dough comes together into a nice smooth ball. Millet, you might be asking yourself, what is millet? Well, it's native to Asia. It's a small, round, yellow grain. It lends a certain sweet and nutty flavor to breads and other foods, and it resembles wheat in appearance and texture, but it is entirely gluten-free. But this is not a gluten-free cookie because I'm using all-purpose flour dough. Done. That is our dough. Okay, put the dough right on a piece of plastic wrap, and I like to just flatten this, divide it in half, and we want 2 rectangles, approximately 3 by 5. Very malleable, very easy to use. What a simple way to make some dough. And you can just put them on top of each other like that and chill them well for at least an hour. So once you make the dough, you can make the fig filling. In a small saucepan, heat over medium heat until just simmering 8 ounces of soft dried figs that are chopped, the stems are removed, and 1/4 cup of tawny port. That'll help soften the figs and make them tender enough to process in the food processor. And although considered a fruit, figs are actually an inverted flower, and the seeds are the fruit. They have the highest fiber and mineral content of all common fruits, nuts, or vegetables. So these will come to a boil, and the figs will start to soak up all the port. Takes about 10 minutes. I'll just let these sit. And we have some already done, and look how plump they've become. Much plumper than the dried fig itself. So just transfer this right to the food processor. 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar. And scrape out the vanilla beans. And if you don't know how to do that, take a sharp knife and cut all the way down, and then scrape sideways. All of this black that I'm scraping out, that is the seeds of the vanilla orchid seed pod. Millions of seeds are on my knife. And a pinch of salt. And now just process until you have a nice paste, about a minute. So here's our dough, nicely chilled into a little brick. And the easiest way to roll out this kind of wet dough is between two pieces of parchment. And you want to roll this out into a rectangle 8 by 11 inches. And this is one of two. You remember we made 2 rectangles. The dough is nice and cold, and you want it all the same thickness. And now remove the top paper. So divide the fig filling into half and spread the filling down the center of your dough. And just leave a little space at the top. Okay, then fold this side and this side. And now we're just going to let this chill covered like this until it's hard enough to slice into pieces and bake. Take your chilled cookies and place on a parchment-lined baking sheet. Make sure the seam side is on the bottom. And then brush with egg and cream, 1 large egg and a tablespoon of heavy cream to make a really rich wash for the cookies. There. And then with a soft brush, brush the entire surface with this egg and cream wash. Make a lot of cookies because you have a lot of egg wash. And then, final step is to sprinkle generously with turbinado sugar, which is a beautiful brown crystal sugar. This is the icing on the cookie. And have your oven preheated to 325 degrees and bake until golden brown. It's going to take anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes. Now to serve, slice crosswise into 3/4 inch slices. And I don't think the ends are that pretty. Save them for later. Use a serrated knife. Makes a very pretty cookie. Serve immediately. You'll have none left over. Figs are often referred to as nature's most nearly perfect fruit, and they also make the most nearly perfect cookie. Enjoy. With warm summer days and cool nights, light volcanic soil, and unique mountain-fed irrigation, Idaho is the ideal place for growing potatoes. You may have sat down and eaten a wonderful baked Idaho potato, I'm sure you have, but you may be surprised to learn that potatoes like this add incredible moisture and texture to cakes and breads, something that the Irish have known for a few hundred years. My chocolaty Idaho potato cake is a perfect example. So first, boil a potato. Peel it, cut it into small pieces, and boil until the pieces are tender. That won't take very long. You could also steam it if you like. And this is a delicious, unusual cake. So 1 Idaho potato is all you need. And just cut this up into a coarse dice. Russets are high starch potatoes. This is a russet potato. They're the most widely used potato in the United States. They have a brown knitted skin and a white flesh, and they are used for French fries, for mashed potatoes. Just get that into a pan, cover with water, and bring to a boil. We have some potatoes already cooked and cooled, and you can just mash them with the old-fashioned potato masher. You want to get out all the lumps. Don't mix with an electric mixer. Do not put in a food processor. That kind of repetitive action will make glue of your potatoes. You want them light and fluffy, just like this. And now we have to get our pan ready. And I'm using a bundt pan. Butter it generously with softened room temperature butter. And I find using a brush like this reaches each and every nook and cranny of the bundt pan. Now this is going to be a chocolate cake. I'm using cocoa as my dusting because if I used white flour, you'd see white flour on the outside of the cake once it's turned out of the pan, and we don't want that. We want it to be all dark. So now just sprinkle. I'm using a sieve, and I'm using quite a bit of cocoa. I just Want it to be completely covered. Looks good. And then just knock out all the excess. Very nicely done. This can be preserved. Your dusting cocoa. Just keep that in a tightly covered container in your fridge, and you can use that again. And now to make the batter for the cake. 1 stick of butter, 8 tablespoons unsalted room temperature butter, and cream this with 2 cups of sugar. Measure 3/4 of a cup of potato from your baked potato. That potato was pretty large and I had a little bit of potato left over. You can just fry up a little potato cake in some hot butter on the stove and eat it. Cream this. Add 2 large eggs, 1 at a time. And get that mixture nice and fluffy. Beat well after each addition. While that's creaming, measure out your flour. 1 3/4 of a cup of cake flour. This is non-self-rising flour. 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of baking powder. A teaspoon of salt. Whisk this all together. Those are your dry ingredients. And don't forget 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I can add now my chocolate, melted and cooled, 4 ounces of good semi-sweet chocolate. Just drizzle that in. Add your potatoes, 3/4 of a cup. How many of you have actually made potato cake before? It's very unusual. And now you can alternate your dry ingredients with a 1/2 cup of high-quality sour cream. The acid in the sour cream tenderizes the gluten in the flour and produces a finer crumb to your cake. And I hope you know what I'm talking about when I say crumb. It's that texture of the cake itself, the number of holes per square inch. And it adds richness and makes the cake super moist. And it also adds a deeper flavor than milk and makes for a denser cake. Okay, so now I think that's enough. And we have to now transfer all this batter into this bundt pan. Let it plop right down to the bottom. It actually looks a lot like a devil's food cake. And so far, an entire show, and I didn't get anything on my white shirt. Right into a preheated 350-degree oven until a cake tester comes out clean. Set your timer for 50 minutes. And when you take the cake out of the oven, just put the whole thing, the pan and the cake, on a rack and cool for 20 minutes. Then turn it out on a rack to cool completely. The cake can be wrapped in plastic wrap and stored at room temperature for up to a day, or it freezes really, really well, and you can keep it in the freezer well wrapped for up to a month. To serve, well, I love how it looks. Isn't that pretty? And just slice it into serving pieces. Slice as well. It has a very nice crumb, as you can see. And serve it with a dollop of your favorite whipped cream. Don't skim. Serve this cake at your next party and ask your guests if they can guess the surprise ingredient. I doubt if anybody will ever guess that this is made with mashed potato. Joining me now is our food editor, Sarah Carey. She appreciates a very flavorful but simple recipe.
And important, good ingredients, right? So this recipe is a hazelnut cookie, and hazelnuts are the most important ingredient, obviously.
But only 5 ingredients.
Exactly.
So butter.
Butter, sugar, flour, salt, and hazelnuts.
Excellent.
These are toasted hazelnuts, 375, just until they're golden brown, like 10, 12
Should I be
minutes.
creaming the butter?
Yeah, that's 1 stick.
It's 1 stick,
Yep.
8 tablespoons, a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar.
Right. So this is basically a shortbread cookie made with nuts. Often we make them with almonds or other nuts like that, but the hazelnuts have such an amazing flavor, especially when they're fresh. I like to warn people, and you know this as much as anyone, but they go bad really quickly.
Well, I always keep them in the freezer.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Keep them in the freezer.
I added a half a teaspoon of salt to the butter and sugar.
Great.
And
I'm going to grind these. I want to make a flour.
It's going to be noisy.
Yeah. Hold on, everybody. You want to grind them until they're fine, but you don't want to make a paste, so you have to check every once in a while.
Should I add the flour?
Yes. 1 1/4 cups goes in, and then the nuts go in, and then that's your dough.
I can smell them.
Yeah. So these were toasted in an oven at 375 for about 10 or 12 minutes, and it was a half a cup to start off with.
So here you can put those right in there.
I don't know if you remember, but I went to that hazelnut farm in Oregon, which was so amazing, and I think that's where my love of really high quality fresh hazelnuts.
Have you been to the fig farms in Oregon?
No. Can we go?
Yeah, I want to go. There are 75 varieties of figs.
Oh my gosh.
And we have to go.
Oregon is amazing. The agriculture there is really incredible.
So mix this together.
Yeah. So there might be a little bit on the bottom of the bowl that we can scrape up, and then we can add the water. With a dough like this, you don't have to really worry that much about over mixing because it's a short, like a sablage thing, so it doesn't matter. I'll add a tablespoon and see how that works.
So is that the 6th ingredient?
Yeah, but we don't really like to include water as an ingredient. I know that's the point of contention.
We pick on everybody here. We each pick on each other. So 2 tablespoons, you think?
I would say like a tablespoon and a half,
that looks good. Yeah, I don't think you need more than that.
So that's good. That's it. That's the dough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks beautiful. Look, it does look like a shortbread.
It does.
It is a shortbread.
And can you smell the hazelnuts?
Oh my gosh.
Toasted hazelnuts are really
They are amazing.
These days. So it's slightly heaping scoop.
Oh, and then you roll it.
And then you roll it.
Okay.
Yep. It's 1-inch balls. The amazing thing is when the hazelnuts come off the trees, they just fall onto the ground, and it's like this carpet of amazing hazelnuts. It's like being in a fairyland. It's so incredible. So this should make about 2 dozen, which it looks like it's going to.
And just round, and they
No, then we're going to push them down with a fork.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I forgot. The nice
Mark
little...
them with a little fork, kind of like a peanut butter cookie. I just did one like this. I didn't do crosshatch, but if you wanted to do crosshatch, you certainly could. The oven should be preheating to 350 degrees.
Okay.
They bake like a nice low temperature. All right. We'll put these on another tray. We can both do this. So they just get pressed down with a fork. That helps with even cooking because they're not really going to spread at all because they're a shortbread and there's no leavener in them. But
probably I made the balls too small.
That's all right. There we are. 350 degrees.
Can I just try a couple?
Yeah, sure.
Crosshatch.
They're your cookies. Go for it.
I just want to see how it looks in comparison.
It's going to look great.
There.
350 for about 12 to 15 minutes. They should just be lightly golden around the edges.
Okay. Don't forget to bake these last 5 cookies. So here are the finished cookies. Cool them completely on a rack. Store them in an airtight container for up to 3 days, but they'll never stay in a container for 3 days.
You gotta eat them.
You do have to eat them. Who knew just 5 ingredients could taste as good as these cookies taste? Sarah, thank you very much for your inspiration, and thank all of you for watching. We'll see you next time on Martha Bakes. Holding the cake steady, use a long serrated knife and a gentle sawing motion to trim off just the top. Measure the height of the cake and insert toothpicks at the halfway point all the way around. Again, using your hand to steady the cake, slice through the cake using the same sawing motion just above the toothpicks. For the best looking layer cake, begin with an even surface and uniformly cut layers.